In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught in patterns of behavior that keep us stuck. We go through the motions, day after day, without realizing how our choices shape the course of our lives. At first glance, we might think that foolishness is simply a lack of intelligence, but it's so much deeper than that. A foolish person isn't just someone who doesn't know, it's someone who doesn't realize how much they don't know. They're trapped in cycles of behavior that lead to suffering, but they don't see it because they're unaware of their own actions. In Buddhist philosophy, this concept is captured by the word avidya, or ignorance, the inability to see things as they truly are. Just like a man stumbling through life, blaming the world for his problems, we too can find ourselves stuck in patterns of unconscious suffering. We often don't realize that it's not the world around us causing our pain, but rather our own blind spots that we fail to acknowledge. The Buddha once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This powerful statement is a wake-up call. Our suffering isn't random. It's a direct result of our inability to recognize the patterns and behaviors that are shaping our lives. The first step toward transformation, toward true freedom, is recognizing where we're blind. In this video, we'll explore 6 signs of a foolish man viewed through the lens of Buddhist wisdom. By understanding these signs, we can all take a step closer to the path of self-realization and awakening. It's time to look within and ask, are we truly seeing ourselves clearly? Let's embark on this journey together. 1. The man who thinks he knows everything. A foolish man is someone who believes he knows everything. He holds on tightly to his opinions and refuses to open his mind to new ideas or perspectives. In Buddhism, this kind of thinking is rooted in ignorance, or avidya. It's not just about lacking knowledge, it's about not being able to see the world for what it truly is, failing to realize that there is always more to learn, and that what we know is just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. Think about someone who watches a few online videos about economics and suddenly feels qualified to debate with seasoned professionals. Without realizing it, this person is trapped in a bubble of ignorance. He believes that his limited experience and surface-level understanding are enough to declare himself an expert. The problem isn't that he's unintelligent. It's that he doesn't recognize how much more there is to learn, and how much of his perspective is shaped by a narrow view of the world. In Buddhism, the delusion of self is a major barrier to growth. When we become attached to our beliefs and opinions, we create a mental prison. This keeps us stuck, blocking us from seeing beyond what we already know. Buddha taught us the importance of mindfulness and humility, to recognize that we don't have all the answers, and to approach life with an open heart and mind. This humility is the foundation of right understanding, samadhi, the path to wisdom. True wisdom doesn't come from believing we already know everything, it comes from understanding that we don't. It's about realizing that what we know is only a small part of a much larger truth. When we accept that, we allow ourselves to grow. Only by letting go of the need to always be right can we begin the real journey of learning. Imagine how different our lives could be if we approached the world with that kind of humility. Instead of defending our opinions at all costs, we'd listen more, ask better questions, and embrace the uncertainty that comes with growth. We'd stop fearing new ideas and start seeing them as opportunities to expand our understanding. True wisdom is not about how much we know. It's about how open we are to learning more. It's about embracing the idea that we don't have all the answers and being willing to search for the truth with an open mind. Buddha's teachings remind us that the path to wisdom starts with humility and the awareness that we have so much more to discover. Only when we let go of our attachment to knowing do we start the real journey of learning. And that journey leads to clarity, understanding, and true growth. 2. The man who never takes responsibility. A foolish man is someone who never takes responsibility for his actions. Instead, he's quick to look outward, blaming everything and everyone else, his family, the system, or even the people around him, for the challenges he faces. It's easier for him to point fingers than to look inward and reflect on how his own choices have led him to where he is. He refuses to accept that his own actions, his words, and his behaviors play a major role in the outcomes of his life. This avoidance of responsibility keeps him stuck, unwilling to confront the discomfort of his own shortcomings. This is where the idea of karma, the law of cause and effect, comes into play. In Buddhism, karma teaches us that every action, whether good or bad, has consequences. It's not some mystical force, but a natural law that governs all life. Just like a seed grows into the plant it's meant to become, our actions, thoughts, and words shape the future we experience. When we fail to take responsibility for what we do, we deny ourselves the opportunity to truly understand the impact of our choices, and we remain trapped in a cycle of suffering. For example, consider a man who constantly struggles with his relationships. Every time one falls apart, he blames the women he dates or points to circumstances outside of his control. He says things like, "If only I could find the right person," or "Women just don't understand me." Instead of taking a hard look at how his own actions contribute to the breakdown of his relationships, his tendency to shut down in arguments, his lack of communication, or his fear of vulnerability, he avoids confronting his own role in the issue. He chooses to protect his fragile ego by denying any personal responsibility, and this denial keeps him stuck in the same patterns. In Buddhism, karma is all about understanding that our actions have inevitable consequences. If we continue to blame others, we only perpetuate negative karma, keeping ourselves trapped in the same cycles. By refusing to face the truth and take responsibility, we miss the chance to grow and evolve. We make the same mistakes over and over without learning from them, and we continue to suffer as a result. When we take responsibility for our actions, we begin to break free from the patterns that hold us back. It's not always easy to admit that we've played a part in our own struggles, but this is the first step toward true transformation. When we understand that we are the creators of our own destiny, we gain the power to change it. We stop being passive bystanders in our own lives and start actively shaping the future we want. Think about how much different life would be if we all took responsibility for our choices. Instead of blaming the system for financial difficulties, we could look at how our habits, our decisions about spending and saving, and our approach to work have contributed to our financial situation. Instead of blaming our family for unresolved issues, we could examine how our own actions or lack of communication have shaped the family dynamics. Accepting responsibility for ourselves means we stop being victims of circumstance and start taking control of our lives. Taking full responsibility for our actions is a crucial step toward growth. It's the key to breaking free from the cycles of blame and stagnation that keep us stuck. When we embrace karma and understand that our choices matter, we step into our own power. We no longer wait for others to change, we focus on changing ourselves. In Buddhism, this concept of awakening is central. It's the realization that we have the power to shape our future through the decisions we make right now. When we let go of blame and take responsibility for our actions, we reclaim our ability to change. Only then can we truly heal, grow, and begin to evolve into the person we are meant to be. 3. The man who cannot control his emotions. A foolish man is someone who cannot control his emotions. He is like a leaf caught in the wind, allowing his feelings to dictate his actions, rather than taking a step back to choose how he responds. In Buddhism, attachment to emotions is seen as one of the root causes of suffering. Emotions themselves are not bad. Anger, fear, jealousy, and sadness are all natural human experiences. However, when we become attached to these emotions, when we let them consume us, they take control of our minds and our lives. We end up reacting instead of responding, and this often leads to regret, guilt, and deeper suffering. Imagine someone driving home after a long day, only to find himself stuck in traffic. As the minutes tick by, his frustration builds. He starts to fume, his mind racing with thoughts of how unfair the situation is. Soon, he's yelling at the other drivers, his grip tightening on the steering wheel, completely consumed by his anger. But what happens next? He doesn't make the traffic move faster. He only makes himself more upset, and his emotional outburst leaves him feeling drained and powerless. In the end, his reaction does nothing to change the situation, and only adds more stress to his life. This is a perfect example of how a foolish man lets his emotions drive him. Instead of taking a step back and observing the situation calmly, he reacts impulsively. Each burst of anger or frustration only fuels more negativity, reinforcing the cycle of suffering. In Buddhism, this is a fundamental lesson. It's not the emotion itself that causes harm, but our attachment to it. We get caught in the feeling and believe that we must act on it immediately without considering the consequences of our actions. Buddhism teaches us that mindfulness, or sati, is the antidote to emotional attachment. Mindfulness is the practice of observing our thoughts, emotions, and experiences without becoming overwhelmed by them. It's the ability to acknowledge our feelings, but not let them control us. Through mindfulness, we create a space between stimulus and response, allowing us to make thoughtful, measured choices about how we react to situations. The goal is not to suppress or deny our emotions, but to recognize them for what they are: temporary, passing states of mind. Anger, frustration, and fear may arise, but they do not define us. They are simply part of the human experience, and they will fade if we don't cling to them. By practicing mindfulness, we can learn to pause, breathe, and make a conscious choice in how we respond. Instead of reacting out of anger, we can choose patience. Instead of giving in to fear, we can choose courage. Instead of letting jealousy control us, we can choose understanding. Emotional control, then, is not about suppressing our feelings or pretending we don't feel upset or angry. It's about acknowledging these emotions and allowing ourselves to experience them fully, without judgment or attachment. The wise person understands that emotions are just like clouds in the sky. They come and go. The key is to not get caught up in them, to let them pass without letting them take control of our actions. True peace comes when we recognize that we have the power to choose how we respond. The wise person doesn't let emotions dictate their behavior. Instead, they choose to respond thoughtfully, with wisdom and patience. In doing so, they create an inner peace that no external circumstance can disturb. By learning to control our emotions, we unlock the ability to live in the present moment, free from the chaos that uncontrolled feelings bring. In the end, emotional control is not about denying our humanity. It's about living in harmony with our emotions, acknowledging their presence without being ruled by them. It's the foundation of inner peace and the path to a life filled with clarity, wisdom, and self-mastery. When we can master our emotions, we can master our lives. And that is the true power of mindfulness. 4. The man who surrounds himself with fools. A foolish man often surrounds himself with people who reinforce his ignorance. Instead of seeking individuals who can challenge his views, expand his understanding, or inspire him to grow, he chooses to stay within the confines of comfort, associating with those who share his limited perspective. This is not just about the people around him, it's about the environment he chooses to immerse himself in, and how that environment shapes his life. In Buddhism, right association, kalyana mitta, is crucial for our spiritual development. Buddha emphasized the importance of the company we keep, teaching that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. If we surround ourselves with those who are negative, complacent, or stagnant, our own growth will be stunted. Consider the man who constantly spends time with complainers. People who are content blaming life for their struggles, but who never take any steps to improve their situation. These are the individuals who constantly point fingers, whose conversations revolve around what is wrong with the world, but who make no effort to better themselves. Instead of stepping out of their comfort zones, they remain locked in a cycle of frustration and victimhood, convinced that they have no control over their lives. When a foolish man surrounds himself with such individuals, he inadvertently reinforces his own limitations. He, too, begins to blame the world, to adopt a passive mindset, and to accept the notion that things cannot change. In this environment, growth is nearly impossible. We can only rise as high as the expectations and habits of those around us. If we are constantly surrounded by negativity and defeatist attitudes, our own potential becomes suffocated. This is why right association is so important. It's not just about being around people who agree with us. It's about being around people who challenge us, who question our assumptions, and who encourage us to strive for more than what we thought was possible. Buddhism encourages us to seek wise companions, individuals who inspire us to be better versions of ourselves. A wise companion is someone who brings out the best in us, who helps us see beyond our limitations, and who motivates us to keep moving forward on our path. These people don't necessarily have to be older or more experienced, but they should possess qualities we admire and wish to cultivate in ourselves: humility, patience, discipline, and a commitment to self-improvement. The environment we choose to spend time in shapes our thoughts, actions, and ultimately, our destiny. If we are consistently exposed to negativity, laziness, or complacency, we absorb those traits, whether consciously or unconsciously. However, when we surround ourselves with individuals who embody the qualities we aspire to, those who strive for progress, who seek wisdom, and who push through challenges, we elevate ourselves. Their energy and mindset rub off on us, and we begin to see what is possible, not just for them, but for ourselves as well. The Buddha taught that we should not only look for wise companions, but also strive to be wise companions ourselves. Our influence on others is just as powerful. If we want to grow spiritually and intellectually, we must also be mindful of the energy we bring into our relationships. Are we lifting others up, or are we contributing to their stagnation? This lesson is simple yet profound. Surround yourself with those who inspire and challenge you. The people we spend time with are a reflection of where we are, and more importantly, where we are headed. If you find yourself surrounded by people who don't encourage you to grow, it's time to reassess your circle. The company we keep plays a significant role in shaping our thoughts, our actions, and our overall growth. If we want to reach our highest potential, we must make intentional choices about the people we allow into our lives. Just as a plant needs the right conditions to thrive, so too do we need the right environment to flourish. Choose your circle wisely. Seek out those who bring out the best in you, those who help you see your strengths, challenge your weaknesses, and motivate you to continue evolving. It's in these relationships that we truly grow. 5. The man who chases pleasure instead of discipline. A foolish man is often someone who chases after fleeting pleasures, ignoring the deeper need for self-discipline and long-term fulfillment. This tendency to prioritize momentary satisfaction over lasting well-being can show up in many forms: indulging in unhealthy food, overindulging in entertainment, or seeking out superficial relationships that don't nourish the soul. These actions, though they provide immediate gratification, ultimately leave the individual feeling hollow and disconnected from what truly matters in life. In Buddhism, this attachment to sensual pleasures is known as tanha, or craving, and it is considered a primary cause of suffering. The more we chase after fleeting pleasures, the more we feed the cycle of craving, which only deepens our dissatisfaction. Imagine someone who spends most of his time partying, eating junk food, and avoiding responsibilities. While the night may be filled with laughter and temporary distractions, the next morning brings with it a deep sense of emptiness. The momentary high of indulgence fades quickly, and he's left feeling physically drained, mentally foggy, and emotionally unfulfilled. The immediate pleasure he sought has come at a much higher cost than he may have realized. The fleeting nature of this pleasure only reinforces the belief that true happiness can be found in external indulgence. And yet, he continues to feel emptier with each passing day. Buddhism teaches us that the pursuit of happiness through indulgence is ultimately an illusion. While it may offer temporary satisfaction, it can never provide lasting peace or contentment. Buddha himself renounced excessive pleasures in favor of a life grounded in mindfulness, focus, and inner peace. He understood that to truly find fulfillment, we must learn to tame our desires and focus our energy on cultivating virtues like patience, wisdom, and compassion. It is through self-discipline that we can break free from the cycle of craving and find the path to genuine happiness. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is the practice of right effort, samavayama. This involves putting forth disciplined effort to develop positive qualities and let go of harmful habits. Right effort isn't about forcefully suppressing desires or trying to be perfect. It's about cultivating balance and mindfulness. By choosing to exercise restraint in moments of temptation, we train ourselves to make choices that align with our true well-being. In doing so, we create a foundation of stability and clarity that supports our growth, rather than the chaos and instability that often come with indulging in fleeting pleasures. Consider the difference between the man who continuously chases after pleasure and the man who practices self-discipline. While the former is caught in a cycle of temporary highs and inevitable lows, the latter understands the deeper joy that comes from delaying instant gratification in favor of long-term fulfillment. He understands that lasting happiness comes from the cultivation of self-control and the wisdom to know that true joy is built through effort, patience, and the mastery of his desires. The wise person knows that self-discipline is not a punishment, but a gift to oneself. It's the ability to endure short-term discomfort for long-term peace. Just as a gardener must patiently wait for the seeds to grow, the wise person understands that the best rewards in life come not from quick fixes, but from steady, consistent effort over time. They practice mindfulness in their daily choices, knowing that each moment is an opportunity to cultivate the habits that lead to lasting happiness. True fulfillment comes from the ability to delay short-term pleasure in exchange for long-term joy. In this process, we become stronger, more focused, and more aligned with our highest values. The pursuit of fleeting pleasures may provide brief moments of satisfaction, but it's through self-discipline that we unlock the deeper, more enduring joy that comes from living a life of purpose and meaning. The wise person chooses growth over indulgence, knowing that the path to true happiness is paved with a disciplined effort to cultivate what truly matters. 6. The man who never learns from his mistakes. Finally, one of the most dangerous signs of a foolish man is his refusal to learn from his mistakes. He finds himself stuck in a repetitive cycle, caught in the same patterns over and over again, yet somehow expecting different results each time. This is the essence of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, a cycle of suffering and ignorance that we remain trapped in unless we break free. When we don't learn from our past, we perpetuate the same mistakes, unknowingly binding ourselves to the same sources of pain. Imagine someone who repeatedly enters toxic relationships, asking why he always ends up hurt. Each time he finds himself deeply involved in a relationship that brings only heartache and frustration. But instead of reflecting on his own choices, he points to fate, to bad luck, or to the other person. He refuses to ask the hard question, what part did I play in this? He never learns the lesson that these relationships are a mirror, reflecting parts of himself that need healing or change. And so he repeats the same patterns, expecting different outcomes but finding only the same disappointment. This cycle is not just an individual experience. It's a common trap that many of us fall into when we don't take the time to reflect. We often look outward when things go wrong, blaming circumstances or other people, rather than looking inward to understand how our own actions and thoughts have contributed to the situation. In doing so, we miss the opportunity for growth that every mistake, every setback offers us. Buddhism teaches that suffering is a teacher. Each moment of pain, failure, or difficulty carries with it a valuable lesson, if we are willing to learn from it. Life doesn't hand us hardships by accident. They are opportunities for transformation. The wise person understands this deeply. Instead of running from his mistakes or denying his role in them, he takes the time to reflect on what went wrong, what he can learn from the experience, and how he can adjust his actions moving forward. This reflection is where true wisdom begins. It's in the willingness to look at ourselves honestly, to accept our flaws and our choices, and to make the necessary adjustments that lead to deeper understanding and growth. Take the example of someone who consistently faces setbacks in his career. Perhaps he gets passed over for promotions, struggles to find meaningful work, or keeps making the same mistakes in his professional life. Instead of reflecting on his behaviors, whether it's his lack of communication, failure to take initiative, or procrastination, he may blame the system, his boss, or his colleagues. By refusing to learn from his past actions, he remains trapped in the same cycle of frustration and disappointment. Learning from mistakes doesn't just mean acknowledging when we've gone wrong. It means truly understanding why something didn't work and using that knowledge to change our approach in the future. It's not about feeling guilt or shame, but about embracing the growth that comes from self-awareness. Mistakes are inevitable. They are part of the human experience. But when we allow them to pass without reflection, we lose the opportunity to evolve. By learning from them, we turn our failures into stepping stones on the path to wisdom. Buddha's teachings emphasize the importance of mindfulness and right understanding in every aspect of our lives. When we are mindful of our choices, when we stop and reflect on our actions, we can break the cycle of samsara, of repeating the same mistakes without change. The wise person does not repeat the same mistakes. Instead, they use each failure as an opportunity to learn, grow, and evolve. This continuous process of self-reflection and adjustment is what leads us closer to enlightenment. The path to wisdom is not linear. It is filled with twists, turns, and setbacks. But each misstep, when seen through the lens of mindfulness, is an opportunity to step closer to the truth of who we are and the life we wish to lead. The foolish man is the one who repeats his mistakes without reflection, while the wise man is the one who learns, adapts, and uses every experience, whether good or bad, as fuel for growth. The lesson here is simple but profound. Learn from every experience. Whether the outcome is what we wanted or not, there is always something to be gained. Each moment is a chance to better understand ourselves and the world around us. The wise person doesn't fall into the trap of repeating their mistakes. Instead, they see them as opportunities to grow, learn, and ultimately move closer to the wisdom and peace that lies beyond the cycle of suffering. As we reflect on these 6 signs of a foolish man, it's crucial to remember that these are not just traits of others, but mirrors of ourselves. In Buddhism, the journey to wisdom begins with self-awareness. It asks us to look deeply into our own lives, to notice where we might be blind to our own behaviors, and to make the conscious effort to change. This is the essence of awakening, recognizing where we are, accepting responsibility for our actions, and transforming through the practices of mindfulness and self-discipline. The road to wisdom isn't always easy, but it's always within reach. By cultivating right view, right speech, right action, and right mindfulness, we can step out of the cycles of ignorance and suffering and move closer to a state of inner peace and enlightenment. The more we practice, the more we create space for clarity, growth, and the wisdom that arises from a mindful life. So I invite you to reflect on these signs in your own life. Are there patterns that keep you stuck in old ways? Are you ready to change, to embrace a path of self-awareness and growth? The choice, as always, is in your hands. Through mindfulness, self-discipline, and an open heart, we can rise above the foolishness that limits us and step into the light of wisdom and inner peace. Thank you for joining me in this reflection. I hope it inspires you to take a deeper look at yourself and your life. If you found value in this video, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's learn and grow together. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration into mindfulness and wisdom. I look forward to seeing you again soon. May peace and clarity be with you on your journey toward awakening.